Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're super excited about this webinar on future-proofing your brand, how to stay resilient in uncertain times. And let's be honest, all times are uncertain these days. I'm super excited to be leading this webinar with our VP of Success, Aaron. Aaron, how are you doing today? You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, doing great. I'm Aaron Dungca. I lead the merchant success department here at Rebuy. I've been here for 4 years, been in the D2C e-com space for maybe close to 12 years now, first on the brand side, and then I had a brief run at Shopify as well too. Yeah, 2025 has been a crazy year. It hasn't made things easy for e-commerce brands. We've got like rising customer acquisition costs, unpredictable tariffs, operational strain on a lot of brands. So really excited to be joined by our guests today. Let's kick it over for some introductions. First up, we've got Agustin Farias, who is the Trade and Tariff Strategy Lead at Passport.
Yes, thank you. Hi, everyone, and hi, Aaron. Thanks for the intro. Yes, I'm currently doing global trade and tariff strategy work at Passport. I have over 20 years of experience in global e-commerce. So, as you mentioned, very interesting and relevant times, and happy to be here and participate in this conversation. I kick it off now to Brian.
Yeah, Brian Hogan. Over here at Fluent, I head up kind of our GM of our advertising solution. Been in the industry longer than I probably want to admit. Been partners with Rebuy now for a couple of months, and just excited to talk through some of the topics here today and learn a lot from you all.
Great. And then we've also got Jared Goldberg, managing partner at D Luxury Brands. Jared, why don't you give us a quick introduction?
Excellent. Yeah, thank you so much for the introduction, and great to be here with this great panel as well. Yeah, my background is 20 plus years in the direct-to-consumer space across a lot of industry leading and category defining brands. At D Luxury Brands, we're a strategic marketing agency. We really empower growth and profitable growth and acceleration through deep understanding of personas, insights, and strategy that defines great creative strategy, which powers performance for brands. And so excited to chat with you about some of the challenges I think we're all kind of feeling in this space.
Awesome. We've got a ton of experience here on the panel today. And I think goal for the conversation is really like giving tactical, actionable strategies for brands to leverage to future-proof and, of course, stay resilient in these times. As we mentioned, 2025 been a crazy year, and I think one of the main learnings is it'll require a lot more than just hustle. A lot of strategy, agility, and smarter systems across the board for brands to stay resilient and come out of 2025 on top. And certainly, we want this to be a really tactical, candid conversation on how D2C brands are future-proofing, not necessarily by slashing prices or cutting corners, but by building smarter shopping experiences, driving profitable growth, and staying resilient under pressure. So I think the first thing that I would love to do to kick off the conversation, this could be anyone jumping in, is we are seeing tariff rates at their highest levels since 1934. We've got copper, aluminum, and even packaging materials now facing up to 50% duties. For D2C brands, this presents a serious pricing and strategy challenge. So with all this in mind, we're hearing a lot of conversations on efficiency. So to kick us off, I'd love to hear from you all on how you define efficiency within your area and what the right mindset is for brands in 2025 that want to stay lean, resilient, and customer-centric.
I'm happy to lead off here. I think this is a really important question, and I think it's one that all of our brands are really trying to wrestle with in a pretty quickly evolving marketplace. I think one of the core things that we really espouse back to our brands is that the fundamentals, they matter more now than probably ever. And so what does that actually mean, and how do we kind of translate that into kind of actionable takeaways for brands is kind of like that next step. And so knowing your margins, knowing your best customers, knowing what actual drives profitable outcomes. That's really what we're finding that separates, thriving brands from surviving brands. And efficiency for us, isn't just about, cutting spend. It's truly understanding and aligning the KPIs that drive the most profitable outcomes. And for us, part of our kind of core ethos is really starting with, contribution margin, taking our contribution margin, net revenue COGS, variable costs, and really understanding that to then ladder up to some of the other core KPIs that e-commerce brands are truly trying to influence. That shift in efficiency is really around focused growth in our view. And so it's not about playing defense, it's about making every dollar work harder and not wasting spend towards misaligned goals. And so what we tend to find is that the really smart brands that we're trying to guide is aligning finance, marketing, and product towards those known profitable outcomes using contribution margin, and for us, first order profitability as those guardrails to really efficient success. It also then ladders back to the customer, which we'll talk about maybe in kind of future questions, but margin discipline around sustainability is really important. And the two ways that we combat that is really understanding the margin and then understanding your high, mid, and low value customers that you can go and extract more value from.
Yeah, if I can add to that. So for us at Passport, so we offer a set of internationalization solutions to help brands and merchants reach customers globally. And we have two operating models. One is basically cross-border shipping or cross-border e-commerce, where if you have your 3PL main warehouse in the US, from there you get to customers internationally. And then we also offer now a new service for local operations in countries like the UK or EU, Australia, New Zealand, Mexico, and we're also launching in the US for what we call in-country enablement or in-country fulfillment. And on top of that, on Shopify, we allow for support geo-targeting and geolocation, pricing in multiple currencies, during tax calculation, depending on the country where your customer is, as well as pricing strategies and especially now more relevant, as we've been seeing. Just to keep in mind, this obviously these new tariffs are for products coming into the US, but many countries have actually stay away yet from retaliating, for lack of a better word, to the US and imposing tariffs on their own. In fact, the EU, for instance, just announced recently a 90-day period to renegotiate and look at a trade deal. So with that said, then obviously for us, efficiency is in diversifying your customer base and looking at reaching obviously customers outside of your home market, in this case, the US, with some of the solutions we offer, right? So it's all about creating a larger base. Typically, most US brands, their international sales is probably 5 to 10%. So suddenly, in the last couple of weeks, 90% of your volume is actually now more expensive as you bring your inventory into the US. And we can talk more about some of the solutions we're offering some US merchants to mitigate those risks.
Yeah, and from my vantage point, like the tariffs don't impact us because I'm not a DTC company, but what we have is we have a solution that helps these DTC customers as a way to unlock incremental profit, which obviously can offset a lot of these changes and uncertainty. And for me, in terms of efficiency, it's really about, I think, Jared, you called it like, how do you get every dollar just by working harder, not by adding costs, not by adding headcount. And what we have through our partnership with Rebuy is a very seamless solution where DTC companies can start generating incremental revenue by just implementing a post-purchase monetization opportunity that really doesn't impact the consumer journey. Like it's really seamless because this is after a purchase has been made, and we've tailored it to be very native to the user experience. It's something that the consumers actually see value in. And really, it's just a way for DTC customers and clients to unlock incremental revenue by just literally pushing a button. And we found that, there's been some hesitation with some brands of, not wanting this to impact the customer journey, but we've proven through, the thousands of retailers that we work with that it really has no impact. In fact, there's studies that we've done that shows there's a positive impact. But really, it's about getting incremental revenue without having to put any more money into the process, and in a way that's very seamless and efficient.
Love all of that. And I love how much of a diverse perspective this panel brings to the table. I mean, we've got contribution margin, we've got efficiency, just maximizing the traffic that is hitting any B2C stores. We've got efficiency when it comes to fulfillment, but also inventory management and cost of goods sold as well too. A lot of things that we're hearing from brands on the Rebuy side, which of course, Rebuy, we power personalization and revenue optimization across the online store, is like, okay, the way that I'm selling has become a lot more complex in that the contribution margin is going to vary by the customer segment, potentially based off of the product mixes that we're having. So how can we take, if our main goal is to sell, how can we take products that maybe are heavily impacted by any tariffs or, any regulatory things that are happening, and perhaps combine those with more profitable products? How do we, be more efficient in regards to monetizing all areas of our online store as well too? So kind of to bring it back to the core of the question, I mean, a lot of brands are trying to figure out, okay, like, where do we start? Especially now that we've got the de minimis exemption expiring, tariffs on some imports are topping, 30 to 50%. Certainly a tough margin hit if you are not prepared. So maybe, Jared, I'll kick off with you. If a merchant were to come and say, we're worried about tariffs, margins, customer drop-offs, what's the first lever you'd advise them to pull?
Yeah, I'll give kind of a series. This is a really good question, and this is one that we're wrestling with, across our portfolio of brands. And so, this evolving landscape. This is an evolutionary discussion that we're having. And so, there's focusing on a couple of different aspects, right? Customer retention is one of the probably underserved avenues for a lot of direct consumer brands. And then just being much more surgical with your acquisition strategy are some of the quickest levers. Retention, definitely the fastest lever. You've already paid for the customer. So, getting more out of them to be an LTV driver should always be kind of that key area of focus for brands. At the same time, not to allow, kind of new customers who are not the right kind of customers to ultimately kind of drag down both margin, profitability, and, kind of long-term value of the brand. And so there's a few different, tactics that, that we're kind of consistently talking with brands about. One is really at our kind of core, kind of strategic philosophy across each brand, but that's really focusing on acquiring the right kind of customer. And that right kind of customer, not all customers are created equal, and not all CACs are created equal either. And so, in a lot of cases, both agencies as well as brands, they can tend to fall in love with one metric or another. But if you're really not, the customers acquired aren't incremental to the outcomes, then we really want to, explore how we course correct and acquiring those. And so persona building is one of the key elements that we have found to be both trackable as well as driving a profitable outcome for brands. So, doubling down on those segments, focusing on high margin, both SKUs as well as repeat customers and customer types, is one of those issues, right? Where we're talking about tariffs rising, but we also aren't talking about media costs at the same time, right? And so you've got this kind of really ugly, two-parted front that, us as both brand, advocates and agencies were really trying to combat. The next one is another one that, I think a lot of brands can take away, which is re-examining your promo strategy. In a lot of cases, blanket discounting is a margin killer. And there's really smart opportunities for promo and promo strategy with segmentation, gated promos for repeat buyers, bundling to drive AOV. And so, taking a real critical eye to your promo strategy, we find to be another area of really deep segmentation. When you actually look and pull back the layers of your database, inevitably you're going to find this promo only shopper in some cases. You're going to also find this other shopper who's a full price shopper. And then you're going to find a blend, which is the majority. It's maybe kind of in between, right? And so how do you then complement a promo strategy for them? And if you're in the premium luxury space, et cetera, how do you, in some cases, change that margin outcome is a really important one. A couple others. One is, balancing a new customer acquisition with extracting more value. Again, database, you've got to really, explore your lifecycle marketing, your customer journey mapping, SMS and email reactivations and post-purchase series. Those are really key areas. And then the other one is just asking, in some cases, to bring more value to each order and each purchase. And so, customers will pay more when you pair that with great perceived value. So enhanced merchandising, stronger PDP or brand storytelling, thoughtful bundling that Rebuy certainly complements. Those are really great tactics. And then I'll throw out one that may be controversial, right? Which is like, also consider price increases, right? There are certain surgical categories that, it doesn't always lead to lower conversion rates and or churn. And so, I'd be remiss to not put that on the table as a consideration. It's the downside of the environment that we're in right now. And some brands, particularly if you really have done the due diligence on your customers, can you actually have price elasticity there that you could potentially tap into.
Yeah, I have a kind of an interesting point of view and purview into this, because we deal with a lot of our advertisers, our direct consumer products. So think of like, Farmer's Dog or Disney Plus. Like we work with a lot of advertisers, and what I find is the advertisers that really can segment their audiences and really look at the data and understand that each channel isn't just its own kind of beast. We're like, for the search channel, we can afford $100 customer. It's really kind of the brands that get into the layers of segmentation and understand, like, okay, within that search category, within that paid social, getting into the like 2 layers deep of like, hey, yeah, collectively it's $100, but when I look down, I can pay $170 for this source or this tactic. I can pay only $60 for this tactic, and that's where I would recommend these brands really get into their data segmentation, look at lifetime value, look at, Jared, as you point out, promotions versus non-promotions, and really understanding your audience's segmentation, just being more informed in how you look at it. I'm seeing the people who take that more analytical approach are the ones that are succeeding. If you're just trying to be more higher level in terms of how you bucket audience or how you bucket channels, or even how you bucket audiences, you've got to go a layer deep. You've got to get more knowledge in that segmentation, because that's really going to help you deal with a lot of these impacts and really set you up for the future.
Yeah, for us is it may be counterintuitive what I'm gonna say, but for us is start reaching out and selling internationally outside of the US. Grow your business internationally, because as I mentioned earlier, suddenly the US market is becoming more expensive with all these executive orders and all the new duty rates, which I'm sure it's impacting everyone, right? You've seen Canada was hit with a reciprocal tariff of about 35%. Mexico is at 25%. China is at about 30%. And there is a 90-day period that will end by next week, I think, August 12th. So All these things are happening. So yes, you got to look, obviously, as Jared mentioned, and you as well, Brian, is you got to look at your pricing strategy on how do you go about and based on your margins, as you obviously open up to other markets, embed some of these additional costs, right? But you also got to look at your supply chain and fulfillment strategy now, and where how are you moving inventory from your suppliers, be in Asia or wherever they are, into the US, the timing of the transition of that inventory, how you value that, the customs valuation. Now, we've been hearing a lot about, hey, can we use alternative custom valuation methodologies now? So this is also very relevant now. So again, and here is where I may differ a little bit about the conversation, which in our world is much more operational, and the cost efficiencies on your inventory strategy and your supply chain and your customs processes. So.
Got it. Yeah, really well-rounded perspectives from the group, and I think part of what we're hearing from a lot of brands, and Jared, you talked about this initially around, first order profitability, is like getting to profitability on that customer, reducing the wastefulness of the spend when it comes to acquisition, and then improving the efficiency, with shipping costs rising, international fulfillment, becoming more complex. So would love to kind of round off this thought with, on the topic of profitability, a lot of brands today are, figuring out how can we get profitable quicker on this customer acquisition, especially understanding all of the various factors that are coming into our operational costs or our margins, our customer acquisition costs as well too. So based off of what you all are seeing, what do you think is the most effective way for e-commerce teams to improve profitability today, especially without sacrificing that customer experience?
Yeah, so I'll jump in on this one. I think it's really important that as the first starting point for any brand, is to really kind of answer 4 key questions, right? One is, who are my best customers? And more importantly, who do I need to avoid? Secondly, how do I acquire more of them? Third, what are the products that lead to profitable outcomes? And the fourth question is, where can I drive more efficient, profitable growth? So like distribution, channel, platform, et cetera, right? And I think, one of the key areas, those are the 4 key questions where when you've really got a robust persona-driven, customer-centric mindset and strategy, the rest of the chess pieces effectively kind of start to answer themselves. And so what we like to do, and the way that we think about this is, one guardrail that we talked about is, understanding contribution margin tick, right? The second one is, understanding how do you drive a profitable outcome at each order, right? And so establishing that first order profitability, right? AOV minus COGS, variable costs, and CAC. And, our brands that are, that we're working with on a strategic basis, that is one of those kind of core elements, right? Right, tick that box. But then the next one is truly understanding the incremental value of each one of those customers acquired by persona, right? And when I say that it's important to understand the highest, mid-tier, and your lowest tier, if you know what products, you know what messaging, you know what channel distribution your low customers are, you're acquiring low customers from. And conversely, if you know the mid and high tier customers that you're acquiring them from, that really guides your entire kind of media plan, distribution strategy, and then you're also your CPA chains up and down the funnel. And so those are really important mechanisms that we utilize inside our trackability for kind of each brand. And then inside each brand, platform and platform distinction across the value of the customers. And so we take this, very maniacal approach, A, on the customer, B, then translating that into tangible guardrails across each platform. And then the last part is the measurability of that, right? Really, truly understanding, by incrementally bringing these new customers to the table? Are they leading to not just first order profitability, but the follow-up to that is, are they now leading to a higher, more profitable outcome for the brands long term? And so that's really if you want to call it the playbook, that's really truly kind of the playbook that we utilize to kind of accelerate brands in this, in this kind of environment. All the channels that everybody's doing, the Metas, the Googles, the TikToks and advertorials and whatnot, they're all byproduct of really understanding how and where to go and acquire those customers, and we really utilize the personas to guide that strategy.
Yeah, I think from my point of view, I would say, what are the leaders in the space doing? And I would point to Amazon, right? So Amazon launched their retail media network, which is now a $50 billion revenue stream. The whole commerce media area is going to be $100 billion in revenue, and it's how can DTC customers tap into that revenue, understanding that they're not going to have the resources of an Amazon or a Walmart or a Target. And that's where, when you look at kind of the monetize, the Rebuy monetize solution, it's a very easy way to get access to that revenue that brings in immediate margin to the business without having to invest in the infrastructure and the people to do it. And again, I just look at there's ways to look at how do I just generate incremental revenue, incremental profit without heavy lifting. And that's kind of where I would recommend, again, obviously from a bias standpoint, but you're seeing how much revenue is coming into this commerce media. It's growing rapidly. If I'm a DTC brand, like how can I participate in that? Understanding I have no money to invest in. Like, are there solutions out there that I can leverage to get into that? And I think that's where the solution that we have with you is the way in, and you are making immediate profit per order that you can either reinvest into growth, you can take it as an offset for some of the tariff expenses, and just find that new revenue stream is where my advice would be to commerce DTC companies.
Yeah, I love that take. And, we've spoken to a lot of brands about our Rebuy Monetize partnership and product with Fluent. And it's so interesting how the positioning and understanding like how you're viewing this profit, how you're viewing this revenue coming into your store can really help influence the efficiency and kind of how you are almost like perceiving the dollars and how they're working to you. So as one example, some brands may take a look at it and say, oh, this is going to help offset some of the additional costs or challenges that we're facing with any tariff implications. For those that are seeing rising CAC or customer acquisition costs, it's like, okay, let's take the revenue that the profit that I'm taking and monetizing from my store, and let's chip that off of our customer acquisition cost, and just much faster way to accelerate profitability on the traffic that you're already driving to your D2C store.
If I can add, for us, obviously, I wish we had an easy answer to improve profitability, but it's more about looking at your production, sourcing, and supply chain strategies. Of course, go back and negotiate your pricing with your suppliers and see if they're willing to take some of the burden of the added duties. These things may take not weeks, but months to implement. So that's why I'm saying they're not easy. And as we all heard, so this environment in which we're in, these new tariffs are probably here to stay. We're not necessarily going to see them going away anytime soon. Although you could argue there is some cases that may go into the Supreme Court that are challenging those, but it's hard to say. So use that as your strategy. I mean, again, look at your how you classify your products, what's called the HTS or the Harmonized Tariff Code, and do some now the term tariff engineering is coming now more where you can actually modify certain materials of your product that can actually lower your duty rate of a specific item. There is different valuation methodologies, as I was mentioning, I'm sure you have heard the concept of doing a B2B2C as you are importing into the US. That requires obviously very complex and legal setups. Of course, US brands are maybe used to this. If you're an international brand selling into the US, that may require additional more work. Consult with your trade lawyers or customs brokers, where obviously we're also here to help. So there's different approaches that you can take, and I'm willing to talk a little bit more about some of the others as we go along.
So, Brian, you mentioned earlier around like on the media side, taking almost a surgical and very data-driven approach to how you're looking at all your various media channels as well too. And I would love to know what are some of the biggest mistakes you're seeing in how brands or companies in general like are allocating their media budgets, and then how you're helping them course correct.
Yeah, I think there's some brands that are kind of slow to react in terms of their media allocation. We've seen this, through my career when there are tough times. It's the brands that kind of, go away from the more fluffy brand awareness spend and really transition it into more of a channel where they can truly track their ROI. And I think you're seeing some companies that are, that are way ahead of this and are really going into the channels that can truly track ROI, and they're getting into as we talk, the efficiencies of those channels. Like those are the ones that I'm seeing succeed. I think that there are some that are a little bit slower to react, and that's where, just given my experience and seeing this through a couple of different ups and downs of the economy, it's really be quick to make a change. And when you get into something new, obsess about the data. Like this isn't just to change for the sake of changing, it's changing and understanding down to every dollar that is spending, like what am I getting back across the board. Those are the brands that I'm seeing being successful. That would be my suggestion, is be quick to change and obsess about the data.
Love that. So that touches on the kind of like the acquisition side, and I think obsessing about the data, I see a lot of head nods around here. It can be applied to so many different parts of the business, not necessarily just media buying.
Yep.
And then on the monetization side as well too, like we've got a lot of retailers that, yes, they're concerned around their contribution margins, but also very conscious about their brand. You touched on this initially around some of the studies that have been done, but kind of curious on at Fluent, especially for brands that are cautious around what happens right after checkout and their brand equity, how do you ensure that those post-purchase placements drive outcomes without disrupting that part of the journey or diluting the brand?
Yeah, no, we obsess about the that experience, and it is a very sensitive part of the journey, is that purchase. And for us, because it happens after the purchase is made, is kind of a clear distinction of like the purchase has already been made, but that doesn't mean that the journey ends and there's not a true focus on the total customer journey. And that's where we make this as native as possible. So to the consumer, it feels like it's just a natural extension of the process. So that's something that's really important to us, is making it feel like it's just part of the process. It doesn't flash out as a big ad. It doesn't kind of interrupt the process if you're buying. So make it native. Make sure that the advertisements that are shown are relevant to the consumer. That's another really important part of this, is the consumer. The research we've done, if the offer is relevant and is something that they see value in, they like it. If you show something that has no value to them at all, that's probably going to have a negative connotation. So the two big things is make it native, make it feel like a natural extension of the customer journey, and then the advertisements just leverage the data that we get to make it as relevant to the consumer as possible.
Got it. And continuously refining the experience, I know, is something that we're really big about. Everyone here in this panel is huge about. Augustin, on the Passport side, because I know you mentioned your number one thing is expand internationally. Obviously, tariffs, margin, just one piece of a larger puzzle. International shipping, certainly getting pricier in some instances, more scrutinized. As brands expand globally, what is your advice for balancing cost, speed, and customer experience in the fulfillment strategy, especially now that customer expectations are higher than ever?
Yeah, so I will say two things. And if now obviously with the de minimis gone away from China and then from the rest of the world by the end of the month, there's different things. Again, one is if you're a brand who are probably already selling more than 1 million or 2 to countries like Canada or the UK or the EU, you gotta consider, instead of doing cross-border shipping, meaning fulfilling from the US to those markets, moving your inventory pre-sale into that market. That's what we call in-country fulfillment or in-country enablement. That way you can lower your duty exposure as you forward deploy your inventory into that location. Now, granted, that has other operating cost implications now, because you have to partner and operate with yet another 3PL in the foreign market, deal with the legal and tax regulations in those countries. But again, with the right partnerships, and this is something that Passport that we can support with our seller of record or importer of record services, yeah, you're probably better off. First, because you can reach your customers faster, and also your last mile delivery transportation cost could be lower if you forward deploy and have the inventory, let's say at a warehouse in the UK for the UK market, or in the Netherlands for Europe, or in near Toronto for Canada. That's one approach. The other is what we recently launched, duty drawbacks. This is basically a service where as an importer into the US, every product that you export, you are entitled to claim up to 99% of the duties that you initially paid on the importation and the fees back from the US government. Granted, it's not an easy process. It takes some time, but it's a lot of money that brands and merchants are leaving on the table. You got to apply for privileges from CBP, but once you get those, it's relatively straightforward how you file these claims. And again, that's something we can support on setting up brands to that are exporting to claim those now high duties as part of this duty drawback program.
Yeah, really smart plays. And a lot of the brands that we work with, so it's setting yourself operationally to take advantage of the opportunities that are in front of you and international expansion. And then on our side, it's, once that is all set up, how do we present the right products to those right customers by targeting geolocation? And Jared, I know you were mentioning like understanding who those high value customers are. Jared, I'll open it up for you. I know we've got a few minutes over here. But you'd mentioned a few tactics, and like we know that chasing marketing KPIs disconnected from business goals doesn't work. You talked about bringing it back to the fundamentals. What are you seeing that actually does work? And maybe if you could talk about how you're shifting focus from just driving down CAC to acquiring those customer segments with stronger long-term value.
Yeah, so a good question. ROAS is turning into a bit of a vanity metric in a lot of cases. And so, truly kind of drilling into the customer behavior, the product match. And then again, as I've kind of beat up a lot, but is really persona-based and customer-centric marketing is really kind of truly the magical unlock that brands should really be exploring. In a lot of cases that, it comes back to understanding the customer, understanding your positioning with that customer from a messaging hook and value propositions standpoint, the offer testing that you're utilizing inside of your funnel. And then ultimately, some of the behavioral segmentation and targeting that you do, post-purchase, on-site, et cetera. Those are going to be some of the key blocking and tackling that a lot of brands. But ultimately, if you've got this really great kind of creative strategy, they can then fuel a great creative engine, which is ultimately going to steer towards a higher value customer. That's definitely, some of the key unlocks. We had, one brand that, once we did this persona exercise, they were targeting the wrong customer, and that's why they couldn't scale the brand profitably. And so what we identified was, you're going after the wrong customer, you're going after it with the wrong product in some cases as well. And so it's understanding that relationship between your hero product, that customer, and what profitable growth looks like. I think it's really piercing through that, as Brian kind of mentioned, being kind of insane about the data across every touch point with the customer. That's where we're really seeing acceleration with brands.
Lots to take away from this one. I think I'm hearing obsess over the data, really take a look at all the various different segments and pieces of your business to understand where the additional efficiencies can be added.
Thanks so much, Aaron, and thank you so much to our guest and for everybody who's attending. Make sure, too, that you head over to rebuyengine.com and check our events page for all of our webinars coming up, especially our Monetize Office Hours, which happens the third Friday of every month at 11 a.m. Pacific.